You may have picked up on this from the fact that I try and review and play a lot of games, but I am not usually one to stick with a game for long periods of time. Yes, I did at one point have a debilitating League of Legends addiction, and I've played some other games like Borderlands 2, Diablo 3 for way too many hours grinding it out, but I'm reformed. That's not who I am anymore. Granblue Fantasy Relink is trying to pull me back in, though. This is another action RPG that wants you to really keep playing it long after the credits have rolled. But is it worth playing for that long? Well, let's talk about it. Granblue Fantasy Relink is a pretty interesting game. I thought it was a more standard, I guess, JRPG, just with action combat. I expected going into it this long story that you would progress through. And then after about 5 hours playing the game, I was finishing chapter 7 of 12, realizing that maybe this game is not what I thought it was. It does have a story, and it's a pretty serviceable one. You play as a group of guy pirates or something, sailing the skies looking for some promised utopia or something. And I apologize if I'm getting this wrong, I'm not really big into the anime. And then one of your party members gets taken from you by who ends up being the big bad villain of the game. So it's up to you to go find them, rescue them, and stop the bad guy. It's a pretty simple game, and the story doesn't want to waste your time. You accomplish your goal fairly quickly. Over that time, though, you will go to a number of different locales. There's a desert, there's a forest, there's a lava world, there's a interdimensional space-time continuum thing. All the traditional JRPG locations. But even for how short it is, the game honestly felt a little padded out to begin with. The areas are pretty wide open, and I was actually reminded a lot of Diablo 3's sort of large open maps that you would just run around in, finding mobs, taking them out as you go towards whatever your next objective is. Each map has a number of chests and resources that you can go pick up, and the requisite number of trash mobs for you to clean out as you go. Once you're done doing all that, go to the other end of the map, trigger the next cutscene, fight the next boss, or whatever, move on to the next area. It's a pretty simple formula, but I found these maps to be a little too big and a little too sparsely populated to fill that size. I wish there was either more to do in these maps, more enemies to fight, or just that they were smaller. There's a lot of downtime just aimlessly sprinting around the map, and I guess that maybe is on me. I guess I could have just ignored everything, but I get a little OCD when I see a treasure chest or a resource on my map. I have to go find it and collect it before I can move on. But all of that isn't really too important if the gameplay itself isn't that great. Happy to report the gameplay is actually a ton of fun. Each character has a relatively unique to them regular and heavy attack, as well as up to 4 equipable abilities that they can use. You bring 4 characters in your party, but you manually control one of them. Each of these characters plays completely differently and has their own entire skill tree for you to unlock. And doing this takes time. I played the entire game, as well as a good chunk of the endgame, and still had not maxed out my main 4's skill trees. If you really want, you can play this game for a long time with all the different characters, all the different play styles that you can unlock. There is really a wealth of content here, assuming the content you want to play is a kind of Monster Hunter style game. As is the case with many of these games, once you beat the story, now you can finally play the game. You unlock a ton of new missions that you can go on, where missions are pretty much just arena fights between you and a big monster or waves of monsters. And the more you do these, the further you go. You'll unlock higher difficulty quests all the way up to the maximum level. As much as I did enjoy the game, and I genuinely did enjoy it, the combat itself is smooth, it's fun. There's a good rhythm in using skills, closing in for damage, dodging enemy attacks. That really works. This is a lot of fun, and if this is the kind of game you like to play, I think you'll really love it. But for me, I am really not one to grind games out, and in that back section of that game, the final chapter that is sort of the epilogue chapter, they just want you to do quest after quest after quest after quest, and I just couldn't do it. I gave up on it when I got to like level 70 or something, and then they gave me level 80 quests to do, and I still hadn't finished the epilogue because you have to collect all these journal pages. And I just was done with it. I'm sorry, guys. If that makes me a bad person, so be it. But this is a game that really requires a lot of time investment, I think, to see all of it. And there is a lot to see. In addition to the 7 or 8 characters you kind of start with, there's another like 15 that you can unlock using crewmate cards that you get from playing these late game missions, and each of those also plays completely uniquely. They all have their own skill trees and skills, mix and matching your party to get sort of that optimal set, picking the character, finding the character that you love to play as, and there are some genuinely unique characters. The main guy is just like your average swordsman, but then you've got a mage, you've got this guy who uses a gun, there's another guy who also uses a gun, but is essentially a third-person shooter instead of an action game. There's a lot to try and a lot of different favorites that I'm sure that a bunch of people have. All of the pieces are there for this to be one of the great action RPGs, and I wouldn't be surprised if many more veteran people in the genre see it as such. But if you're someone like me who needs a story or something and gets tired of just repetitive arena battles, unfortunately, that can't be overcome just by having a solid game. I do also wish there was just a little more story, or at least that it was better woven into the narrative. While I was doing the campaign, it felt like there were so many attempts to slow down the pace. I already mentioned the big areas that you run across, but there's also a lot of downtime where you're back at the village and you have to run and talk to 7 different people, and they're all on opposite sides of the map. Why am I doing this? I don't know. It takes a long time. Each of your individual crewmates has an entire backstory that you can experience, but that is experienced sort of off screen. You go to the quest counter. Each character has like 11 chapters that you can watch, but then those are just narrated text. So it's not really even that engaging. It's sort of a side thing. It feels unimportant. It is tedious to go through each of those 11 chapters, the menus, all that. There's just a lot of stuff that it feels like was implemented to take time. And in my head, it was like, why can't we just have another mission? Why couldn't this exposition be given during a mission? Why can't there have me run around another map and fight a bunch of people? Because the game works so well when you're actually doing the combat, but it doesn't work so well in that downtime between combats, and there's just way too much of it during the story. Overall, Granblue Fantasy Relink is a solid action RPG. A game that's more focused on the endgame and postgame than it is on telling a sprawling epic narrative. That's not a bad thing. That also makes it not for everyone. If you're looking for a game like Monster Hunter, like Diablo, where the name of the game is just doing more and more arena fights to get better gear, to level your characters up, to get better gear, to get better skills, to get better gear, to fight harder monsters, numbers go up. This is honestly one of the best. I really loved the combat. It's simple but deep at the same time and engaging, and it really works. But just know what you're getting into when you buy this game. If you just want to play it for the story like me, honestly, it may be worth passing on. The story's over in like 10 hours, and then there's a lot of post-game, but you might lose interest in that pretty quickly if you're like me. But what do you think? Are you still playing Granblue Fantasy Relink? Let me know in the comments down below. If you liked the video, consider hitting the like button, subscribing to the channel, and I will see you all with the next video.